We're getting back to energy. And of course, energy is everywhere. How much energy do you have today? Can you last? Can you get through the day? How many cups of coffee do you need? How many Red Bulls? Everybody is involved with energy on some level, whether it's personal energy, energy to run their machines, their devices, their cars, their houses, their offices, places of business. The society, the civilization runs on energy. So what's the problem? Well, we don't have a problem with that. The problem is that the people who control this planet, the elites, they want to dominate the energy. Monopoly, cartel, that's what we're talking about. And oil is the perfect mechanism for this to do. And they can foment wars in the Middle East, where a lot of the oil is. And they can make oil seem scarcer. And they can raise the price. And they can manipulate the price up and down because they control the basic energy commodity of the planet. In their view, which they are promoting to you, to everybody. This is what we have, folks. We have oil. That's all we have. There's nothing else, really. If we give up the oil, we're all going to go into the darkness and the chaos, which is a complete lie, because there have been many suppressed energy technologies, not the woo-woo fairy tale, I put a crystal on the mantle and looked at it and suddenly my car started driving down the street. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Frank Schumann that I spoke about in the last segment. This was a guy an engineer who pioneered engines that ran on solar in the beginning of the 20th century. What happened to that? That was an existing, workable, useful, dramatic breakthrough technology right then and there at the beginning of the 20th century. 1913 started pumping 6,000 gallons of water per minute through that solar energy off of the Nile into cotton fields in Egypt. You would think somebody would get a clue from that, revolutionize it. Let me tell you about something really extraordinary. Passamaquoddy. Passamaquoddy. The Maine, state of Maine, Passamaquoddy tidal basin project that JFK was obsessively interested in since his days as a U.S. Senator. We're talking in the late 1950s. In 1959, he went up to the state of Maine and looked over this proposal to build a tidal basin project right off the coast of Maine with a huge turbine, because the height of the water tide every day was very high and very low and very high and very low, very good for turning a turbine and creating electricity. An enormous amount of electricity, get this, for the state of Maine. In 1962, he commissioned a report. He was president then. What is happening with Passamaquoddy? It's being stalled all these years. Different entities are fighting over it. Different cartels are trying to stop it. I want a report. The report was turned in to President Kennedy. It was a positive report on the possibilities from Passamaquoddy, the tidal basin project. Shortly after that, JFK was murdered, and the whole project went into abeyance. It's not just the Passamaquoddy project. It's anywhere in the country, in America. It's anywhere in the world where there is a coastal inlet that has those conditions. There are many, 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 many coastal inlets all over the world that could be used to build these water turbine projects. This is not woo-woo fairy tale up in the clouds, alternative energy. This is straight ahead down the line electricity production using the ocean, using the tides and turbines. Everybody knows about this. There's at least one company I researched some years ago, there are probably more now, that can put small turbines in rivers and produce energy for local communities. This is not strange, weird stuff. This is real stuff. And remember, Nikola Tesla, the famous inventor, when he died, the FBI instantly raided his hotel room and took all of his papers and confiscated them. And what were those papers all about that have never been returned? They're about alternative energy, which is really mainstream breakthrough energy. When Tesla envisioned being able to supply free energy to the entire planet, or pennies worth of cost for free energy for the entire planet. What are we talking about when we talk about human health, folks? Think about this, come on. We're talking about energy. What's the difference in energy level between a very sick person and a very healthy person? Human energy, not just energy to run cars, human energy. We've had a great deal of suppressed research about that, not starting with, but including Royal Rife, the famous scientist in Southern California who developed his own breakthrough microscope that could observe microorganisms in action. And his frequency generator that he used to experiment on these microorganisms and kill off destructive ones with frequencies. In his time, you can see the newspaper articles, they appeared in Southern California. He was heralded as a genius by medical authorities until he decided not to cooperate with them to form any sort of cooperative business venture, at which point he became persona non grata, at which point he became a fraud. All of a sudden, the man was a fraud. He was a genius yesterday, now he's a fraud. Now he's dangerous, now he's evil. Now he's distracting people away from what can really cure cancer. Oh, baby. Rife cured, what was it, 16 people of cancer who were seriously ill with cancer. The newspaper articles appeared on this. It was verified. And then suddenly it never happened. Suddenly it didn't happen. Do you realize what we're talking about in terms of human energy uptake? The difference between somebody who's in desperate straits with cancer and a cured individual? What about Stan Brzezinski down in Texas? Houston. What is it, 7 grand juries, state and federal, that have been mounted to destroy Brzezinski because he invented his own medicine to treat cancer that was not part of the pharmaceutical complex, that worked on a number of patients. Brzezinski never overstated what he could do with his medicine, neoplastins. He continued to do research. He continued to treat people. I know a guy in Los Angeles personally who lives for, I'm going to say 20 to 25 years longer than doctors said he could because he was treated by Brzezinski. And yet now, tremendous strictures and restraints on which patients Brzezinski is allowed to treat. Who can come to his clinic? What can he do with people as a doctor? And the legal assault never seems to stop on the guy. Grand jury after grand jury. They can indict a ham sandwich, is the saying about a grand jury, but no grand jury ever indicted Brzezinski. Why? Because they all realized that the DAs and the prosecutors were lying through their teeth when they tried to destroy this humanitarian doctor in Texas, and so they refused to turn back permission to prosecute. We're talking about human energy there, which is at least as vital as the energy to power a civilization through cables, through wireless means, whatever. We're looking at suppression of alternative technologies from top to bottom, all over the place, everywhere. And this JFK Passamaquoddy story, you check it out on Google in depth. Andrea Silverthorne, I believe is the woman's name, who did the original research on the full story behind this, the full story. We're talking about, you want a conspiracy and a scandal, a devastating scandal that ends up one way or another with the murder of a US president and a project to liberate the country from oil monopolies, Passamaquoddy. These are incredible stories that I'm talking about here, incredible human events. And what do they all point to? They point to the fact that for a very long time, we, the human race, have had the capacity to produce energy abundance in every conceivable way from many different vectors on this planet, and that this has been suppressed by the energy cartels and monopolies and by the secret societies like Bilderberger, like the Council on Foreign Relations, like the Trilateral Commission, like the CIA, like many different groups behind the scenes, like mega corporations operating in concert with intelligence agencies. I'm not blowing smoke here, folks. Abundance is a viable principle that exists now for everybody on the planet, through the means that have been discovered and invented and then suppressed. Suppressed to create the scarcity that we now face. The artificial money scarcity, the artificial job destruction, the artificial health destruction through the practice of toxic modern medicine, the artificial destruction of different avenues of energy from solar and ocean to more sophisticated means, as in the case of Tesla. The destruction of all of that by their suppression, so that you and I and everybody else are now living in an artificially created world. That's the reality that has been imposed upon us. And thousands and hundreds of thousands of lying, deceiving scum, propagandists, public pundits, fake scientists have cooperated, have sold their souls to prop up the idea that we are living in a world on a planet of extreme scarcity, and it's tooth for tooth, claw against claw all the way, when that has not been the case for a very long time. This is the secret in the temple of the monopolies. This is what they are concealing. And in the field of energy, it's absolutely monstrous. And there are many more energy breakthroughs that I could mention here, but I wanted to focus on a few to set you exploring, to set you finding out for yourself. This is the case. When you drive your car to the pump and you look at the price, you're not just looking at the manipulated money price of oil, you're looking at a far greater manipulation. You're looking at the destruction of societies and civilizations based on this premise that oil is all we've got, folks. Oil is all we'll ever have. And to assure you once again, I'm not with the people who say, well, we have to shut down all the oil, and while we're at it, all the coal, and shut down everything. Because I want to go out into the forest and crawl along the floor and eat roots and tubers and live in a tree. That's not my goal in life. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that we keep the energy avenues open that we have now, and we actually let in the door the suppressed technologies, which by now would have obviated our need for oil. It would have been done as it was supposed to be done, you see. It's not depopulate the planet, let's go back to living in trees and let the few barons of the estate run the entire earth. That's not the picture. That was never a sane picture for anybody. Only the lunatics running the asylum thought that was a good idea and still think it is. No, in the natural scheme of things, by the early part of the 20th century, oil would have started to be overtaken. It would have happened. and the technologies that Tesla and others developed would have by now overtaken oil, and we would be living in a different world where every human would have access to energy. Every human, minus nobody, would have access to all the energy they need if these technologies had not been suppressed. No question about it. Ditto for the field of healing. By now, we would have seen incredible breakthrough healing of the entire range of human disease. I was reminded that, take these names down, Nick Gonzalez, doctor in New York, Stan Brzezinski, doctor in Houston, Dr. Joseph Gold in New York State. 3 breakthrough technologies, medical technologies. And I don't mean by that, oh, this cures everybody all the time. People sometimes write to me, what do they think I am, some kind of a complete rube? Take this and everybody in the world will be cured all the time. Hold on. What these doctors were saying is very promising. It works. We've seen it work. We want to study it further because we know it can be applied to more people. It's been shown to work. With gold, it was hydrazine sulfate for cancer patients. Nick Gonzalez in New York, an enzyme and nutritional protocol for cancer. Stan Brzezinski in Houston, neoplastins, a protocol for cancer. And here's the kicker, folks. Eventually, all of these 3 were studied by the official domain of medical science. In other words, clinical trial with volunteers. Forced into it by pressure and pressure. All right, we'll look at it, we'll look at it. And then every single one of those clinical trials, in all these cases, were perverted and twisted. The protocols were changed to produce a negative and disastrous outcome. That's what we're dealing with here. Murderers. That's what we're dealing with. People who murder in order to protect, in this case, a monopoly of the toxic drug pharmaceutical complex and cartel. But the difference between sickness and health is all about energy. The difference between a society of scarcity and abundance is all about energy. And if you want to talk about free energy, what it really means is not just energy out of nowhere. It means actual energy delivered for free or for pennies to everybody on the planet. Yes, it can be sold. Of course it can be sold. It doesn't have to be sold at any kind of a high price. It can be sold for pennies to everybody, in which case whoever is producing this technology, however many companies, are all making a nice profit. Nobody's suffering. Everybody's having an abundance of energy. We have to liberate this fact about where the world is now. We have to liberate these technologies and more technologies that will give us the abundance that we need in terms of human energy and the energy to run civilization. That's the agenda. That's the agenda that the elites are trying to destroy and distract us from with all of this other insanity that goes on day by day by day by day. That's why wars are created at the highest level. Control the monopoly, control the one basic form of energy that we have, the big lie. Distract everybody, give them all kinds of high-flying idealistic reasons for war and destroying each other.
globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super male vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. Super male vitality by InfoWars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com.